All right. Welcome everybody to the today's session around hiring, coaching, and developing high-performing managers in enterprise organizations. My name is Heath Barnett. I'm the head of growth sales for North America for Airwallex. I will be moderating today's conversation and really excited to be sitting down with some of the industry leaders that we have. And so we have Jeff Depa in joining us today, the CRO from Gainsight. And then we have John Idle, the CRO from Demandbase. Welcome today, gentlemen. Do you want to do a quick introduction about yourselves?
Yeah, happy to jump in. So I think you hit the key highlights there. Heath, Jeff Depa, Chief Revenue Officer for Gainsight. Been here for about coming up on 3 years now. We are the category creator and the leader in customer success software, but have been a CRO and a sales leader for probably too long that I should replay here, just given some gray hairs. So.
Awesome. John, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm John Idle. I'm the Chief Sales Officer for Demandbase, the smarter go-to-market company. We have a whole suite of tools and a console to help sales and marketing, work together more effectively to acquire, win, and grow customers. And I share Jeff's feelings and belief. I've been doing it for a while here. I've had a chance to be a part of growing and scaling some teams. So excited to share some of my learnings and mistakes made along the way here.
I love that, the mistakes. I think most of the lessons I've learned personally are from the mistakes that I've made early in my career. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because today we're gonna introduce some vulnerability in this topic, right? This is a personal favorite topic of mine, and I'm really excited to be here today with this amazing group of revenue leaders, so we can talk about something that is critical right now, especially given the environment that we're all operating in. And so, as a leader, your role is critical in ensuring that your sales team is aligned with your organization's goals, has the tools and resources needed to succeed, and ultimately sales enablement and team alignment are essential components of this process. Now, before we get into it though, I really want to set the stage on what exactly are we talking about today, right? And I think the way to kick that off is clearly defining what's the difference between leadership and coaching and not managing, right? Is we hear that word manager. It is the universal common definition, but I think it's actually, we're starting to see that transition of managing to actually leading and coaching. And so, I just pulled the definitions, right? Managing, to handle or direct with a degree of skill, such as to exercise executive, administrative, and supervisory direction of managing a business. I'm curious, Jeff, what is your first reaction when you actually just hear that definition? What are your thoughts when you hear the word manager and that definition associated with it?
I think transactional. And
Exactly.
to me, that's really what separates leadership versus managing, is moving from transactional to transformative. And how do you tie those things that you do in your transactional day to day and drive them up into a vision that can transform kind of how people operate? And that's what coaches do too. I mean, it's fun, it's a sports analogy, but I think of my kid right now who's a baseball player. And he's got an amazing pitching coach who teaches him about how to kind of be self-aware, and rather than telling him what to do, helping him get inspired, but also recognize when he makes a misstep. So he kind of self-coaches. He walks off, he throws a bad pitch. He's like, you know what? I released too early. I did this, I did that. It's painting that vision and helping people get to that vision.
I love that. I love that. And it's funny you use the sports analogies. I use sports analogies all the time, especially when we talk about coaching, right? We're probably going to dig into this later around scrimmaging and role play and how to actually create that environment. But I think you really hit the nail on the head. And so when we talk about the definitions, leading, right? To your example, leading consists of motivating employees and influencing their behavior to achieve organizational objectives. And then we take that a step further on the coaching. Coaching is a form of development in which an experienced person, called a coach, supports a learner or client in achieving a specific personal or professional goal by providing training and guidance. And so I think the biggest thing that I have learned across my career is managing, very reactive, behind the front line. To your point, Jeff, very transactional. Leadership and coaching, very front line. It's very proactive. Radical candor, which is something we'll probably talk about today, is a key component around that to create that collaborative and very transformative environment. So Jeff, is there anything that you wanted to add around like some of the things that you've learned in your experience of like really creating that separation of like what a manager is versus a leader and a coach?
I mean, for me, it all really starts with culture, because leadership development, in my mind, is synonymous with culture. And there's that old adage, right? Like, every culture's got an organization. Do you have it by design, or do you have it by default? And it's critical that you take that into consideration. One of the things that we do here at Gainsight is, I mean, we take culture and values incredibly seriously. In fact, before I even joined the company, I had probably 2 or 3 calls with Nick, our CEO, where we dove into what does it mean to actually live the values of Gainsight. If you look us up, our mission is to prove you can win in business while being human first. One of the things that we set out to go do, and we actually achieved, it's behind me there, is to be, Glassdoor's 2023 #1 place to work. But that's very incredibly intentional. And one of the things that I think helps separate us, especially from a leadership perspective, one of our core values is Shoshin. And it's a concept from Buddhism, which essentially means beginner's mind. And what's really key to me in that is approaching every situation with curiosity. And leaders really get curious about the how and the why, and then that helps them kind of transform the organization. So I think, at the end of the day, it's the leaders that shape the culture. So you have to be really intentional about those values to really get that foundational, that just baseline of where you want people to start and grow from.
Man, I love that. John, I want to push it over to you before I add any thoughts or feedback. Like, what are some of like the key components that you've built in your organization to really promote that leadership coaching environment versus managing?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a great topic to start on here. And I would say, I love the intentionality of, how you broke out the 3 there, Heath, and explained them. And I think that's what's really kind of neat that we're starting to see is that, they're all seen as, different parts of what it means to be, a good leader here. Right. And I think, like, my mind, managing is kind of the things you have to do to kind of like, run an efficient team. But I think that, the next level kind of really successful leaders I know are really great at those other aspects on top of that, right? They can run a functional team, but they're also great at coaching, mentoring, developing their people. They do all those things, really, really well. And I think, Jeff, you keyed in on this. I think it's all about intentionality, and in the culture that you build and set. I do like that some companies are even changing the role title from manager to coach. Like, my last company, we didn't call leaders managers, we called them coaches. And I think it really, again, puts, forward that notion of, it's, we're bringing you in here to bring that higher level function, to be able to be that's uniter who brings together teams and helps tap into potential and help people, kind of realize, their full, available potential there.
I love that. So I think you'll hit both 2 really important ones. And so one was Jeff, curiosity. So it's actually one that, like, we have the cliche, right? The ABC in sales, always be closing. I don't like that one at all. I've transitioned that one to where it's ABC is always be curious. And I think it's critical in how we develop organizations, how we build culture. And we're in the world of sales. This is what we're all here for today. But like, also even how we take that into our customer conversations. Curiosity is what drives discovery. It's what drives coaching. It's what drives everything from the top down. And I think it is like a very critical pillar to really create that like leadership and coaching environment. And then, John, I think you hit another one that was also really important, was the intentionality, right? Is I think like being very intentional around like how you structure programs, how you actually create consistency and repetition in your environment. And I think the other one too is like the intentionality around the environment that you create. Y'all might not agree with this one. I've had some people that do, some people that don't. So would love y'all's thoughts. But like, I truly believe that as a leader, like, we can't motivate people. Motivation is intrinsic, right? Like, Jeff, I can't motivate you. John, I can't motivate you. But with intentionality, my job and my role and my purpose is to create the right environment to where those who are motivated can succeed. I'm going to leave it there. I don't want y'all's thoughts on that.
So firstly, I actually agree with that. I think it's interesting, and maybe it's a little nuance of words, but it's not that you necessarily can't motivate me, but you need to understand what it takes to motivate me, because everybody's different. And that's where curiosity comes into play. it might be, some people are money motivated, other people are recognition motivated, and there's a lot of deeper threads underneath that. But understanding that within your team and then painting that vision that can tie those things together, I think helps you get people kind of rallying towards that goal.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just piggyback on, I like it. It's thought provoking. And I agree. I do feel like, that's one of my mantras is that, you hire for drive and motivation, and I would say inversely, like you can't create motivation when there isn't there, you can't create drive when it isn't there, but you totally, if you have the wrong leaders in place, they can demotivate a team and they can take away all those, magic powers. So I think you have to, hire the right talent and build a system that reinforces them doing their best there.
Yeah. And Heath, one other thing I might add, actually, maybe add a third in there outside of curiosity and intentionality, it's empathy. I've been in organizations on kind of both ends of that spectrum, and curiosity and empathy in some instance kind of go hand in hand in my mind. But that really makes us human. And we were talking before we jumped on here around work from home and seeing kids on the camera and things like that. And it just brings an element of human first into what we do. And I think that's really key to get your team on board, because they're much more apt to really trust and engage in your message if there's actually empathy and they see you being human as well.
Man, I could not agree with that more. I think there's two things that, for organizations and teams that I've ever led, one, and I believe this, and this is how I lead, is like help people become better people, and productivity is a byproduct of that. I think it's that empathy piece, and that curiosity it also kind of ties into that motivation. Is one of the biggest challenges is so many people want to step into, they think it's the normal kind of trajectory, right? It's like, I'm an individual contributor, I'm in sales, what do I do next? I manage a team. Managing people is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, because there is no cookie cutter. Like, you're different, John, you're different, you're motivated differently. And so that changes the way that I lead you. It's the way that I communicate with you. It's the way that I actually set goals with you. And so I think empathy and curiosity are critical components in order for you to also get what you talked about. You got to get buy-in before you can have someone to trust you. You have to have someone trust you before they actually respect you. And I think empathy is a leading piece behind that, because I think where I've seen some managers fall short is they expect that respect is going to be there. And it's like, no. Like there is some relationship building that has to go in with that. And so I think it's a really good point that you called out on that. So it's actually leads us perfectly into the next topic. And so I want to chat about how we create a growth environment and culture. And so, John, I want to kick this off to you first. Is how do you build a growth culture driven by collaboration and accountability?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it starts. Jeff mentioned, it's in the Gainsight, core values. They really focus it and drive it, home here. At Demandbase, we do the same. I would say, it really kind of starts at the top. Like when I, think about this, it's, the expectations or the tone at the top. Even if you're not there yet, I would say it can be an aspirational goal. I think that's sometimes what, vision, can be is what you aspire to be, right? But making sure it's really clear and it's part of your core values. And then making sure you cascade it down, just from there. So making sure that you have an organization, that rewards and sees that. So, one, celebrate the heroes, in your organization that are the ones that not only deliver on expectations, but also help the team get better, that they're willing to share and, be up in front of the rest of the organization, talking about the things that they do to make themselves, stand out and be successful. And so I think that, those two things alone, I think really, kind of help and build, that culture around, making sure that people are sharing, collaborating, helping each other, winning and being successful. And so I'd say, it's the expectations you set. It is, the people you hire. Inversely, I'd also say it is, the people that you fire. I had an old boss who used to always use the old adage of your culture is, who you hire, fire, and promote. And that always stuck with me and resonated. But I do think, the organization, is watching. They are seeing how you manage and address these things, right? And so, if you are, taking the right, steps to celebrate and reward and, make sure the people that are living and doing the right things are the heroes in the story, that's a great thing. And if you have somebody who's not living up to it, the longer you let it linger, the wrong, I would say, message you're sending to the field there. So I think it's important to also, be mindful and watchful of, of all aspects, when protecting something is, as important as culture.
So, Jeff, before I pull it over to you, John, actually, I think you had a really good point, right? Is like around, it's a topic nobody ever wants to talk about, right? How you hire, but also how you fire. But I think it is something that's really important, right? It's like, I truly believe in the hire slow, fire fast mentality, right? We never want to have to fire people, right? And so I think that's also where kind of motto number 2 for me is like coach up or coach out. And I think it's understanding like if I can develop you, I will do everything I can to develop you. But if I can't, maybe it's not the right role for you, or this isn't the right company, then it's my job to make sure I either find a better position for you within the company, or I work with you to find a better transition on the exit side. And so I think that it is something that's really critical for us to pay attention to, and really we try to avoid it. So I appreciate that you actually brought that out and talked about it. And I think the other piece too is the core values, right? It's like it's walking the walk as well as talking the talk, right? It's like we see core values everywhere. And so I'm curious is like what are some of the things that your organization has done to really exemplify the walk the walk?
Yeah, I mean, I think the core values piece, I think, is huge, as we mentioned there. We have a internal reward system that allows you to kind of give kind of high fives at attaboys to folks who are doing things above and beyond, and it's actually kind of a real neat thing, and that's a point system. And I love that actually it ties back to the core values again. We are making sure that we're rewarding folks outside of our organization. I think it's even the time and the intentionality we have around like the meetings that we have, who we're spotlighting, who we're showcasing to, right? So when we close a quarter, giving the top teams, the opportunity to have some spotlight and making sure that they get to talk about, ins and outs and the things that they had to overcome to be successful. Because I think that's always really, really important in any organization there.
Awesome. I love that. Jeff, I want to take it over to you. Is like, what are some of the things that you focus and your company is focused on to like really build that growth culture driven around collaboration and accountability?
Yeah, plus one to everything John said there. Definitely want to celebrate those successes. Gainsight does in my view, a great job of that. But also I think to some extent you want to not necessarily celebrate failure, but you need to acknowledge missteps and do it in a way where I once heard experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And learn from that experience. And I don't want the team or anyone in the organization feel like, man, I can't raise this because it acknowledges failure. That's okay. Like raise it. There's that old adage as well. You never want to lose a deal alone, right? Like, pull in your leadership, pull in your boss, no surprises, that sort of thing. So we try and, maintain that type of culture throughout Gainsight. And, it's what John said. We do a lot of things, outside of, end of quarter huddles. So we do a rally and a huddle after every quarter. And my key goal there, and I push that into my leadership team as well, is like, this is not about celebrating just the sales team. It's celebrating the entire organization that's built an amazing product, a legal team that does just an amazing job for us and pushing deals through the system, an ops team. I go back many, many years ago. I worked at Sun Microsystems. I had a CFO, Steve McGowan, and it's when, post-dot-com bust, that shows my age a little bit. We were trying to figure out how do we get the company back on the right track. And he put this presentation together. It was called The Power of One. And he related almost, things that you do on a day-to-day basis as a frontline individual contributor in any role, and how at scale that makes a massive impact in the organization's, results. And that to me was really profound. I always remembered that. And so it's key to me for people to kind of see, those little wins on a day-to-day basis, or even those missteps and what we learn from them, how they can kind of impact the company at scale.
I love that. Actually, I had a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
Sorry, I was just saying, just like doubling down on something Jeff said, because I could completely agree to, and I would say it's so important. Is the ability to look back and learn, and I do think like it's very topical for where we are right now. Like this last quarter that just closed, is one of the tougher quarters that I've seen in I'd say a long time, right? And we've seen a lot in the last 5-6 years even, and so I think in some ways sales organizations are kind of triggered to just say like, okay, let's just put the quarter behind us. Like, let's just reset. Let's go on to the next one, right? And so in some ways you can become an iterative organization where it's like, let's just keep, going back to the grind and doing the same thing over. And I would say, like, I think the smarter organizations, to Jeff's point, are the ones that actually like take the time to look back and learn, regardless of the outcome too, like win or lose, like what did we do well, but also spend as much time on the things that we didn't do well so that you are using it to get better and learn. So yeah, Jeff, good point. I actually, it's fresh in my mind just thinking about what probably a lot of people who will be watching this are going through right now. To take the opportunities that were given to us. Unfortunately, don't waste a good crisis, as they say, and look, use the last quarter as a chance to learn, sharpen, and get tighter, and resist the urge to just say like, that was last quarter, we're moving on to the next one right here.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, too often I find that we don't ask, what are we going to go do differently? And in this market, I mean, to your point, John, it's been a rough few quarters from a forecasting standpoint. I mean, the business is, the macro is very, very different. So what did we learn from that? And what are we going to do differently? And how are we going to apply it to next quarter to improve in some form or fashion?
Well, I think too, like a big one that you hit, because I actually had a note, is like fail fast, fail forward. It's one of the things that I'm probably most grateful for at my time at Uber was Uber really had a mentality of like, we will mess up. Like that's the only way we will grow. Like our mentality was like, build it, break it, then scale it. And I think it's also critical. And I think it's such an important piece for this topic, right? Because we're talking about how do we create accountability and collaboration. I think addressing the elephant in the room is also a critical piece in creating that environment to where people say, it's okay. We know things aren't going to go perfectly. Let's learn from it. Right? Like I truly believe like failure only happens when you actually accept it. If not, it's just a learning. It's just a speed bump. It's a milestone of like, how can you build better? How can you evolve? And how can you ultimately move faster? And so I think it does start with leaders such as ourselves and our also like, frontline management of like embracing that. And I think it helps like our actual sales teams be more comfortable coming to us with problems, with the solution mindset, but actually being comfortable saying, you know what, this isn't going well. How can we actually do better at this? And I think that's what ultimately creates that really winning type of culture that we're all striving for as well.
Yeah, and I think what they need is what the team needs to see is how you take that and institute it into your planning process, because you can talk about failure as we failed to achieve that objective. But in certain instances, let's face it, we set an objective and we do things like classic high school physics problem, ignoring friction. Oh, there's friction in the real world. And so leadership set a direction. We ignored friction. We didn't hit it. The team, put a valiant effort in and did everything they could and should. But there were some external factors that we didn't take into consideration. So how are we going to do that? Take those into consideration in the next goal or objective and thing that we set. So great point, Heath.
Yep. I think that leads into some of the things we'll talk about later. A lot of it falls also into like the why. And that's a lot of our responsibility as leaders is like explaining that why, the what, and the how. I think that also, to your point, Jeff, helps drive that collaboration accountability. So I'm loving what we're talking about. So I want to take a little bit deeper now is like, what are some of the trainings and coaching best practices that you've built or cadences you've built to refine your team sales skills? What are some of the things you focus on? John, I want to have you kick this one off.
Yeah, this is a great topic. And look, I think it's probably one that should be on everybody's mind right now. Like as we are punching through some adversity here, like this is a perfect time to make sure that you're, investing in your teams and really helping them. And again, as dynamics are shifting, I think the training needs to shift with the dynamics. And so, really critical. But, how do I think about it? I think like that just to open up my head and expose some of my thinking on this, I do feel like, the teams that I see win are the ones that really take a holistic approach to training and enablement. And they think about not just onboarding. I think sometimes I talk to newer teams that, that's kind of their training philosophy is like, we do onboarding and we get them, up to speed with the product and the tools, and then we let them rip. Right. And, I'd say like that's, when you're scrappy, sure, that works. But I think as you get to scale, it's so important that you think about training as kind of a life cycle problem here and something that you're thinking about throughout the journey. And so, in my mind, like I think the first, kind of 30, 60, 90 days is like one part of that life cycle. I also have this like running philosophy that in most sales teams, it takes about 6 months to be competent. Like, the product, you can pitch it, without sounding silly, you can do your job effectively, but it takes another 6 months to be competent. as in like you come in now, like knowing you've got this, your shoulders are back, you've got some swagger delivering, the message, and you really can just do it, cold there. And so I think like everybody should think about that too. Like, how do you kind of shorten those windows down, right? Is there an opportunity here to take the 6 months to be competent down to 4 months, and the 1 year mark, and you move that down to the 8 or 9 month mark? And then I think also like just again back on this like life cycle piece here. Hopefully you're building a growth organization that gives lots of opportunities for people to kind of grow and shape and move within their career. But sales enablement training should follow them along that journey, right? If we're seeing people make the jump from one seller type to another, and we see that they have some gaps, like how do we make sure that we prep them before they make that jump, and make sure that they're ready to run quickly, and take the time that we have together with them in that role. So I'd say like, widen the aperture on this one is always kind of my thought on it, and also make it constantly evolving. Back to the comments about the changing kind of economic climate we're in here. Financial selling is going to be really important. ROI, is going to be really important to drive home, right? And so just making sure that your sellers have those tools when they need it here.
I love that. And I think like for the audience, like I think John, you hit a really good point. Is we focus as an organization around life cycle marketing. We focus as an organization around the customer life cycle from a sales perspective, but yet we don't focus on our actual teams as a life cycle of like, what does my reps life cycle look like from an onboarding and ongoing development perspective? And so I think that's something that's really important that you pointed out for the audience to think about as a takeaway. Jeff, would love to hear your insights, man.
Yeah, what's actually interesting is there's a phenomenon, I call it the tattered old Superman cape, when you don't focus on life cycle, where you onboard somebody, maybe year 1 or year 2, they do something really, really amazing, knock the cover off the ball, but the company shifts and they don't shift with it because you haven't enabled them that way. But they're like, wait a second, I was the top in the company, and they still rest on those achievements from 2 or 3, or some cases 5 years ago. So super important. I divide it into a couple different buckets. There's like run of the business. So think about, what is your training around tooling and tech stack and analytics and reporting and that sort of thing. And the second would really be domain specific. So think about your product, the specific skills around your marketplace. And the third is, I'll call it go-to-market role specific. And so from leadership, it's obviously, it's where I lump in kind of the soft skills from a leadership perspective. This is where, at Gainsight, we have what we call Gainsight's human first value selling. And to John's point, value is absolutely critical right now. We actually had Matt Dixon, who wrote The Jolt Effect. There's a plug for that book if you guys haven't read it, but it's all about overcoming customer indecision these days. And that's a new theme in the marketplace. So we just actually got over our RKO, or February 1st fiscal year kickoff. Big focus across all those 3 axes, because we're going through a transformation as an organization. And every rep, everyone in Gainsight has to change a little bit to adapt to kind of our new strategy. Now, I will say I am incredibly lucky. I've got an amazing, go-to-market sales enablement and operations leader, Kelly Jarrett. So shout out to her. She's done a great job of just building a foundational practice. And we deliver across a number of different channels. So you've got RKO, we've got weekly sales scoop calls, we've got monthly sales academy, we've got self-paced stuff that we put in through our knowledge management system. It's making sure that you have that holistically. But then the next piece of it is, how do you measure it? How do you measure productivity? How do you get feedback from what's working and what's not working, and then double down on that? And that is where you turn it into kind of an ongoing protocol for the organization.
I love the shout out to your go-to-market enablement, because I think that's also a critical piece. And so obviously like my background has been go-to-markets. I did go-to-market for Uber. I've done go-to-market for other startups. And obviously I'm doing go-to-market for Airwallex right now. And I get this reaction a lot of times with most companies I've been at, where they're like, hey, what are your first core hires? And I'm like, hire number 1, enablement. Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, that is the most important role to hire for a commercial organization to actually move faster, because we do like, there's this misconception where it's like, John, to your point, set it and forget it. We have a 2-week new hire onboarding program, and then they start building pipeline. It's like, okay, well, there's a lot more to that, and we need to make sure that we're actually building strong programs to reiterate that. And Jeff, I think you had a really good one around like your 3 foundations. It's kind of similar to mine. Is like, I've always thought about it as like building a house, right? It's like, you've got to build your foundation first, and that is like the first 90 days. Like, what does that new hire onboarding look like? And I truly believe like new hire onboarding is your opportunity to really set up your new hires for success or a long road to ramp. And talking about measuring those metrics, right, is like you're going to see that impact when you have a pretty bad new hire onboarding program. And then I think the second piece is like the framing, right? Is like what pattern of development are we going to put in place? And so I'm a big believer in the 70-20-10 model, to where you're making sure that we're creating those formal trainings. Really, to your point, John, that you were talking about was like the different role plays. And then Jeff, you also highlight a lot of the different enablement programs. But like, what are we doing on an ongoing basis? And then like the other 70% is like, what's the real world? Are we doing role plays, call reviews? Are we doing deal post-mortem, to your point around like, why did we lose a deal, right? Let's actually like review and learn from that. And then I think the last piece is the interior and the exterior finishes of a house. And we talked about this earlier, and this is around like the person, right? It's like every single person is very different. Jeff, like we're looking inside of our own houses right now. Like my office is very different from Jeff's, very different from John's. We're all very different people. And so the way I look at the interior of development is like, this is about personal growth and development. Like every person is unique and they like to have their own kind of interior exterior finish. And so in order for us to really build strong life cycle programs is we got to make sure that we're really thinking of that top down approach. And so really, really good insights, Jeff. Absolutely love that.
Just a comment on that. Sorry, just like I love this theme and the insights here. I'm going to use tattered Superman cape, and I agree. Invest in enablement early. Like one other thing that I just actually think is like super important to call out is like getting onboarding nailed. I think I went down the explanation of like you got to focus on the whole life cycle, but I think like more now than ever, nailing onboarding is so important. I'm sure you all have examples of this, but I saw so many people change companies during the pandemic when we were distributed, where everybody was doing, all of our trainings, connections, we're all digital. Look, it's challenged a lot of folks to really up their game on onboarding. And I can't tell you how many times I hired folks that, made, a bad decision during the pandemic because they joined a company that didn't have a good onboarding process. And when you think about it, like that's such a critical time. It's like you're leaving something certain for something uncertain, but you're excited about it. And you show up that first day with all this excitement about like the future and this major decision you just made. And when you're met with a really bad onboarding experience, like it's nothing worse. I mean, it just causes like a crisis of confidence with the candidate. It causes them to really second guess things. And look, I saw a lot of companies lose great talent because they just didn't nail that step. Right. And so I think it's like, you need to meet them, with that same overwhelming, kind of positive momentum that they're coming in with. You need to make sure that they're getting, ramped up as fast as possible, or else they won't connect with the product. They won't connect with the managers. They won't connect with the company. And that's a real bad day. And so I'd say like, now more than ever, I'd say we still need to focus on the life cycle, but definitely make sure if you're not tight there, for some of the listeners, like make that number one priority and start, ASAP.
Couldn't agree more. And that's like the foundation, right? Like the house doesn't actually work unless the foundation is built first. And I think like, it's funny because you mentioned that because as organizations, we focus so much about our customer onboarding, right? It's like, hey, where's our biggest churn risk? It's usually within the first 2 months and it's customer onboarding. How do we make sure we give that customer the best experience? But yet we don't think about that when it comes to like our commercial organizations is like, hey, when's the biggest type of churn risk for a new hire? Well, they just made a decision to leave another company and come to yours. Like that's your opportunity to either like create that and drive that positive mentality like you're talking about, John, or they're going to be second guessing everything. It's going to be a very frictional 6 months. More than likely, either they won't make it or they'll leave voluntarily. And you as a company just took a loss because we know all the cost that it takes into recruiting, hiring, and onboarding. And so I think it's critical to your point, John, is like onboarding needs to be the most important thing, especially in today's environment right now. Well, guys, like honestly, I'm loving where this is going. So far, like we've set some clear definitions of what we look for, what matters when it comes to growth culture, and then how we can create that growth environment. But how do we ensure our teams are actually taking action and focusing on the right things that make an impact? And so, Jeff, I want to throw this one over to you. Is what is the importance of setting clear targets and understanding or communicating the metrics that actually matter to your commercial organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely critical. There's no way to drive performance or accountability if people don't have that expectation set. I've got a philosophy, partially because I'm a pilot. It's called AIR, but it's short for activities, indicators, and results. And that's what we've tried to determine based on a segment and a positional basis. Like, we can typically focus on, and people very easily focus on, what are the top line results? What are the bookings? Are they meeting that sort of thing? But what are the actually indicators that tell you you're trending that direction? And then what are the activities that drive those indicators? And so we've mapped all of that out and put out, and we're kind of rehashing what we call our AIR dashboards. So very quickly, in a flash, you can look at your territory, your patch, your team, your segment, and see, gee, am I trending the right direction? Am I going to hit this quarter, next quarter, the top line overall objectives and targets that we've set out? If not, is there something in activities that aren't going the way that we expect them to go? But what's also interesting too is it allows you to turn the dials and knobs if you maintain curiosity. So, great example: activity metrics in certain segments of the business become critically important, where it's really a volume play. But certain reps might say, look, I'm going to focus, and I'm going to get in a little bit better with very, very customized outreach messaging, as opposed to doing kind of the spray and pray. And when they can do that and they can up their conversion rates, well, that changes what they need to go do from an activity standpoint. So when you can look at that whole system from end to end and you have those things defined, we all know that North Star, the metric that we're going after, but then how you get there, you can optimize as a team and take learnings from one rep, one segment, one team, and apply that to others to improve the system overall. Now, fundamentally, though, this all starts, and I know everyone's got their own, whether it be OKRs, what have you, we do OPSPs. So we start and do a pretty thoughtful process of planning what are our strategic priorities for the company at the top level. That, by the way, is where ruthless prioritization takes hold, because you need to nail that down to just a couple of priorities. It can't be 500 across a number of pages. And then we build our AIR dashboards down to the segment level from there.
That is awesome. I don't know about anybody else in the audience here, but Jeff, I might have to ask if I can actually take that one. I love that AIR definition. I've actually used the REX framework, which is not mine. It's winning by design, but it's results, effort, and then knowledge or skill, which again, it kind of aligns with your AIR, but it's just so simplified. And I'm big on the KISS models, like simplify. And I love that you create an AIR dashboard. So just having that commonality right there, like I can tell, like your organization is probably pretty tight on like what those actual metrics are. So I love that. John, what I want to throw it over to you is, what are some of the things that you put in place around setting clear targets and like the importance of understanding and communicating those metrics that matter to your organization?
Yeah, I would say, plus one to a lot of stuff Jeff said. I think you did a great job of articulating and obviously showing how, front of mind and visible you make it for your org, which is great. I think just like things that I would add is like, as we're rolling out targets, again, very topical for where we are in the beginning of a new year with Q1 minus. A lot of us probably rolled out new targets, in this new year here. I think like making sure that you're articulating clearly like some of the expectations, or as much of how you came up with the numbers, I think is important. Like giving visibility, making sure that there's clarity and understanding. I even like to take it down another step of and then just talking about like, here's how we came up with the numbers. Here's the science behind this. Here are the things, again, this is where those activities come in. Here are the things that we think are the leading indicators of success, right? And so we want to really focus in and drive towards those. And then allowing the sales team, once they understand that and they have the trust and the buy-in to what you've rolled out, then they can use all those things we talked about, like the curiosity kicks in, right? The creativity kicks in, and how they're going to attack their territory and add their own flair or kind of spin to it. But at least you kind of establish some grounding in, kind of the truths that we need to believe as a team here. And you get them to really understand, what's possible. And then it's on them to kind of figure out the plan of action to make it happen. And I think if you do that and don't skip the step and just rush out and throw a number out there and just say, go figure it out, make it happen. Like taking the extra time in the beginning, I think also, will really help you get more of the team there, which is obviously all of our goals is to get that kind of healthy bell curve of success here. And so I think being able to kind of normalize some of those things up front allows, for a greater success rate on the back here.
Yeah.
Man, go ahead, Jeff.
I would underline that point and put an exclamation mark by it, because, I've been the recipient of quotas throughout my career. And sometimes you get these and you're like, what is this even about? And you can't visualize how you get there. So John's spot on. I mean, we try and do a detailed what we call territory net potential modeling down to every account based on tap rates and conversion rates, and be able to in our ADS by segment, be able to go show a rep like, look, here's your territory net potential. And if you apply what we saw last year or more recently or what we forecast, like here's how it gets you to that number. It breaks it down into bite-sized chunks that you can think, okay, here's what I need to go do. And by the way, then here's the activities and indicators that I need to track from that model to get to the result.
Man, y'all both hit some critical ones. And so, kind of to recap some of this, because I think this is probably very, very important, especially with what market we're walking into. And I think, John, to your point, is a lot of organizations probably did some new target setting, reviewing OKRs. And so, Jeff, I want to hit like around the strategic priorities and OKRs. I think you hit a really critical point, because I've seen this done well and I've seen this done not well, where it's like your company has a company OKRs, and then you go to either like your organization or even your market, and sometimes they do not line up. And that is the quickest way for your commercial team to start questioning, why are we focusing on this when it's not aligned with the overall company OKRs? And so I think like that is priority number one, is like that needs to be tight knit. I think number two, to what you're talking about, and John, you hit on this, is like simple, right? Is like sometimes we like to overcomplicate our strategic priorities or OKRs, and we expect our commercial teams to actually understand what we're talking about. And so for me, like very much leading with the KISS model, I also use one, it's Eli 5. Explain it like I'm 5. If we cannot break down our OKRs like I would tell it to a 5-year-old, we have not done our due diligence as leaders to actually understand what are we trying to achieve here. And then we take that into like the actual explanation piece. And John, you hit that one really well. It's like always leading with the why, the what, and the how. And so the why is like what the OKRs. Why are we doing this? What are we going to focus on to actually achieve the why? But then also on the how piece, Jeff, I think you hit that really well, is a lot of times we do this top down where it's just like, here's your quota, good luck, right? But actually like helping our teams understand, like, here's the process, here's the input, the activity metrics. That's what we can actually control. We can control the process that we bring to the table day in and day out. Can we control the results? Nope. But when we actually focus on our teams of like, hey, here's what the data is showing us, this is the story, and here's what we're going to actually focus on and how, I've seen 9 times out of 10, like your teams tend to exceed targets because, to your point, John, there's a sense of ownership at that point. And I think that's what really ties this like coaching environment, collaborative environment, and also the empathy piece is like, we need to make sure we're tying that down. I think that's why I'm glad like we're actually ending it on this one, is like, this is critical for us as leaders and as managers to be the most effective of building those world-class teams. And so we only have a couple of minutes left. And so Jeff, would love to kick it off to you, is like, what are some of the key takeaways? Like, if nothing happened at the end of the day for this audience, what is like one thing you want the audience to walk away knowing?
When I think about training and enablement and sales methodologies, there's always this debate of what's the best one, what's the right one. And candidly, it's whatever one you're using and your whole company gets behind. And when you make it part of your lingua franca and people start speaking in that language, like people just understand each other. We've been really intentional about that at Gainsight, even from the pre-sales to the post-sales process, because that's another kind of big impact on the customer experience and customer lifecycle, which is how do we define value or hypothesize value up front and then bring that to fruition. And so having a common language and then just using it consistently, even if there's some parts of it that maybe aren't exactly 100% spot on, in my view, is absolutely critical. And then the last thing I would just say is to the point that you were just making, like, there's a lot of stuff we can't control. There's all sorts of philosophy and theory around locus of control, but you can control how you respond. And as a leader, I think that's the key thing for the team, to see how you show up and how you respond in each of those situations, and respond in a manner that actually demonstrates your company's value and the mission that you're standing behind.
Love that. John, what do you have for the audience? What's the one key takeaway you want them to leave today with?
Yeah, look, I'll double down on just invest in enablement early and often, especially right now. I think that's just, the most critical thing you can be doing right now. Definitely focusing on onboarding, making sure that you nail them in that peak moment, and that they are being met with the same excitement that they're coming into your organization with. And I do think just with the changing, economic situation. Your team needs tools, they need support, right? And so this is a great chance for you to show up and give them, more tools to be successful and help them lead through this, adversity and come out on the other end successful here.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, John, for today. Love the conversation. Love the collaboration. Like, really, thank you, everyone, for such an engaging session today. That is all we have today, and we hope that you, the audience, had as much fun with us today as we had with you. Stay tuned for the next session. Bye, team.
Take care, guys.
Thanks.